Hello everyone and welcome back to Bhakti Fundamentals. Today's class continues our mini-series focused on dovetailing, or harmonizing our lives with the Supreme. However, this week we focus on the beautiful analogy of the lotus flower. Krishna himself uses the example of the lotus in the Gita when describing how we can be in the world but not of it by spiritualizing our existence. In other words, how we can convert the material things and activities of this world into spiritual ones simply by a shift in our consciousness. In the Gita, chapter 5, verse 10, Krishna declares, "Those who perform their duty without attachment, surrendering the results of their activities unto the Supreme Lord, are unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water." Now here's where we will describe the lotus effect. In 1977, scientists explained the phenomenon of the lotus effect, which describes the self-cleaning properties of lotus leaves that are the result of lotus leaves being ultra-hydrophobic, which means that they repel water. Because of the way lotus leaves are designed, because of the nanoscopic architecture of their leaves, dirt particles are picked up by water droplets, and this minimizes the water droplets' ability to adhere to the surface of the lotus leaf. As a result, the water droplets run right off the lotus leaf, and at the same time, they clean the lotus leaves. Very efficient. Two things accomplished at once. Now, as we read in the Gita verse, long before scientists discovered and described this phenomenon of the lotus effect, Krishna, the Supreme, described it in the Gita to Arjuna, and what's more, unlike the scientists back in the 70s, he gives it a practical application for our lives. He created and designed the lotus after all, so if anyone's analogies are going to hold up and stand the test of time, his will. So in the verse, Krishna says that we can be lotus-like by being in the world but not of it. We still have to live in the world, but we can actually purify our existence and clean ourselves not unlike the lotus does. How? This is where the lotus analogy is really perfect. The very same actions that previously bound us to this material world liberate us when they are dovetailed in Krishna's service. When we offer the results of our activities to Krishna, the material reactions that otherwise would have resulted from our actions run right off of us, like the water on the lotus. And those same actions, now producing spiritual results instead of material karmic results, then clean or purify us. And this is what Krishna means when he says, we will be unaffected by sinful action in the verse. So the lotus does not reject the water, it lives in it and uses the water to clean itself. Similarly, we can use the material world to clean ourselves. What a perfect setup by Krishna. The lotus, like ourselves, is still constantly in contact with water, the material world, but it rises above the waterline and reveals its true beauty above the water, as we can in spiritual life. The key point to remember is that Krishna urges us to perform our respective duties in the world, like taking care of our families, going to work, maintaining our houses, but to simply dedicate our activities and offer the results of them to Him. This is what it means to perform yoga, to yoke or connect our activities, indeed our whole lives, to Krishna, to the Supreme. He is, after all, the very source of our ability to act in this world. And if we do this, then spiritual life or bhakti yoga is the lotus effect in our lives. And Krishna will help us accomplish this when we start. Remember that He resides in our hearts as Paramatma, our eternal best friend who always wants the best for us. We can start, however small we wish, and He'll help us gradually increase our practice. Note that the spiritual lotus effect just requires a change of consciousness. Most of the time, we're just shifting our consciousness around our daily activities to achieve this spiritual lotus effect. It's the motivation for performing our actions that has shifted. We're doing them for the Supreme. we're converting otherwise material actions into spiritual or devotional service. And in doing so, we are making our activities the means by which we make spiritual advancement and are liberated from the suffering in this material world. So this week, see if the lotus effect works for you. Try offering your vegetarian foodstuffs to the Supreme before consuming them. At the end of the evening, try looking back on your day and offering the Supreme the results of your activities throughout it. This makes for a spiritually conscious life that renders our lives beautiful, just like the lotus flower. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, whose purports we read from in the Gita, would often refer to the Bhakti Yoga system as sublime, and he would further conclude that our lives will become sublime if we practice bhakti. Now, what does sublime actually mean? It means, if we look it up in the dictionary, of such excellence, grandeur, or beauty as to inspire great admiration or awe. You may remember that the writers of the Romantic era saw nature as sublime because of its ability to inspire feelings of awe and reverence, to invoke an emotional understanding that could not quite be captured in words. You had to simply experience it. Of course, we learn in the Gita that material nature is but an energy of the Supreme, just a spark of the splendor of the Supreme, as it is stated in the Gita. The Romantic poets did not realize that they were actually appreciating the artistic touch of the Supreme in nature, and that's what made it sublime. Now, through practicing Bhakti Yoga, our own lives can reach the level of sublime beauty when we convert matter into spirit via this process of dovetailing or yukta vairagya, right or proper renunciation. And that is also the lotus effect in our lives. So that's all we have for today. We really just wanted to highlight this one brilliant analogy for dovetailing that Krishna provides for us in the Gita. Let us know what you think of his lotus analogy, and more importantly, try to see how you can be like the lotus this week, being in the material world, but rising above the material waterline and maintaining spiritual consciousness throughout each day. Thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next time on Bhakti Fundamentals.